Hello, fellow students and Dr. Abe. The purpose of this presentation is to clearly address the ethical issues surrounding micro-targeting in political advertising, the various leadership actions from Facebook, Google, and Twitter, and our recommendations for them. We hope to lay out the facts, present several sides of the conversation, and give our moral and ethical recommendations. We chose this topic because it is very relevant to all of our lives, how we interact on social media, and especially so during this election year. As we have learned, a law in a democratic society usually represents the minimal moral standards of that society. The government has made very little regulation surrounding political advertising, so while we feel there should be more lawful intervention, we also feel the leaders of these tech companies have the moral and ethical obligation to lay out clear parameters for advertisers. They have the ability to create universal principles that lead the overall well-being of that society. There is a very large moral responsibility and one that should be taken seriously.
I for president, I for president, I for president, I for president. You like Ike, I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner and beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John or Dean or Harry. Let's do that big job right. Let's get in step with the guy that's hip. Get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner and beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington. We got to get where we are going. Travel day and night for president. Let Adelaide go the other way. We all go with I. You like Ike, I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington. We'll take Ike to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike.
Political advertising dates back to Dwight D. Eisenhower and his TV advertisements that were part of his Eisenhower Answers America campaign that helped influence his win in the 1950s. Since then, political advertising continued to grow and has become something very common and expected. The early 2000s were when this was taken to the next level with the introduction of social media and other digital platforms that allowed advertisements. Fast forward to 2016, where there was an estimated $9.8 billion spent in political advertising in what was arguably the most highly criticized and polarizing campaigns between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The practice and placement of political advertising continues to grow and has likely impacted or influenced every single American, whether that be positive, negative, or both. And now to watch a short clip on micro-targeting.
In the age of social media, our personal data is a literal gold mine. Google vacuums it up to sell advertising, cyber criminals try to steal it for profit, and more, it can get turned into laser-guided political advertising. Advertising data is already so precise that researchers have been able to track an individual's movement across the city. Campaigns have used that same data to craft political messages that are sometimes directed at only a single individual. And this tool has been used in races and referendums at all scales, from single U.S. congressional seats to Brexit. It also played a big role in our latest general elections. The Obama campaign in 2008 and 2012 made headlines for its grasp of social media and big data. It used Facebook's tools to collect data from anyone who opted in and from their friends, and used it to create political ads. Now, Cambridge Analytica and President Donald Trump's administration are making news for using a less savory version of the same tactic. Cambridge hired participants to take a Facebook-linked personality quiz, and it told Facebook it was collecting data on them and all their friends for research purposes, not political ones. The company also didn't delete the data when Facebook asked it to, and eventually sold the information to the Trump campaign. Experts think political advertising on social media will probably only increase as more people turn to the web for news. State and federal lawmakers are calling for stronger regulation on the data Facebook makes available to feed this machine, something CEO Mark Zuckerberg agrees might be necessary.
As the video outlined, micro-targeting is a powerful digital advertising tool that allows politicians to target ads at specific groups of people or individuals online. Micro-targeting can include, but is not limited to, a combination of demographic, geographic, psychographic, behavioral, and interest-based information. Through our research, we learned that on average, many Americans feel negative sentiment towards political advertising compared to neutral or positive sentiment. A few highlights are 82% of US adults think it's likely they will read misleading information on social media during the presidential election year, and 58% of US internet users would gladly do away with all political advertising. Earlier this year, Facebook publicly stated they would not ban political advertising or micro-targeting of any kind. They will not fact-check advertisements. They estimate to own almost 60% of all digital political ad revenues in 2019 and 2020, even though that makes up a very small portion of their overall advertising revenues. Facebook executives believe the government should set regulations and private companies should not be left with that responsibility. Google stated they would allow political advertising, but under strict restrictions. Advertisers can only target based on age, gender, and zip code. Google's most powerful advertising platforms are Search and YouTube. They recently launched the Political Advertising Transparency Report as part of their commitment to support election integrity and transparency in political advertising. Twitter publicly stated in October 2019 that the company would ban political ads from its platforms. They will still allow issue advertisements to be served. Issue ads are a type of marketing message intended to bring awareness or advocacy to a certain issue. For example, global warming, abortion regulations, wage gap, gun control, or immigration reform. These are three very different stances on political advertising, and next we will address this from a moral and ethical lens.
Targeting, more specifically micro-targeting, has drastically increased in popularity amongst advertisers over the past several years, and has led to what social media users feel is an overwhelming number of ads, and the part of social media they dislike the most. Despite the dislike people have for these ads, this gives politicians the ability to utilize micro-targeting to cut through the noise and focus their ad money on the individuals they are specifically trying to reach and influence. Not only does this allow them to target a specific group, but it also allows them to reach the greatest number of people within that group, with more people having social media than cable subscriptions. This results in two types of consumers. On one end of the spectrum, you have the individual who stays informed through social media, news outlets, articles, attending rallies, watching debates, and maybe even volunteering for a campaign. This person is more likely to determine which ads are fake, deceitful, or true. Unfortunately, on the other end of the spectrum, you have individuals who rely solely on social media for their news. This minimizes their ability to determine the validity of the ads, and they are more likely to believe some of the false advertisements they are being served. Due to the overabundance of ads being presented to consumers on a daily basis, they have been forced to develop methods to determine what is real and what is fake. A staggering 80% of US adult internet users believe there is a fake news on Facebook. You see a similar sentiment across other social media platforms as well. This mentality poses a significant uphill battle for advertisers to overcome in order to present ads consumers feel are honest and transparent. During the 2016 election, Cambridge Analytica was able to harvest data from hundreds of thousands of Facebook users, of which they then passed off to the Trump campaign for them to use without the consumers knowing. The data was harvested unbeknownst to Facebook and included far more information than advertisers are normally privy to. These kinds of data breaches and misuse of consumers' personal data only compound the frustration consumers are feeling when it comes to the validity of ads they see on social media.
Is it right to continue to allow political advertising given the lack of rules and regulations with digital media? Is it right for one to degrade or disparage a political opponent to garner more votes in an election? Is it right for the government or these leaders of the tech companies to set forth the rules and regulations for political advertising on social media? Is it right to allow advertising, both fake and real, to influence a presidential election? Is it right for the leaders of these companies to point blame at the government for lack of regulation when they have the power to regulate themselves? Even though many ethical dilemmas exist with political advertising, it is important that we as Americans continue to have it, as it is a great way to stay informed, stay connected, and educate ourselves with real information. As previously stated, the tech giants Facebook, Google, and Twitter have all differed in their handling of political advertising on their social media platforms. As great as some of the steps taken by the tech giants to help Americans remain informed with accurate and consistent information, some of the approaches have been dismal at best. As leaders of Facebook, Google, and Twitter, they have the moral responsibility and ethical duty to present accurate information on their platforms. With over 2.5 billion Facebook users, billions of searches on Google, and over 330 million active Twitter users, these leaders have the ability and power to influence millions of Americans and billions of people worldwide. It is of utmost importance that there should be a precedent set forth by these tech giant leaders that is consistent across the board. There should be political advertising, and it should be accurate, informative, and transparent. After all, these advertisements directly affect the election, which arguably affects all of us.
Facebook, Google, and Twitter have the ability to create universal principles that lead the overall well-being of the society. As we have presented, Facebook, Google, and Twitter as leaders have a large moral responsibility to act ethically to benefit the greatest number of people. They also have influence, tech capabilities, innovation, money, and millions of users that equates to massive amounts of strength. We believe that as leaders in the tech space, they have an ethical and moral obligation to benefit the greatest number of people, which is also known as the utilitarianism principle. They should use their strength to lay out clear parameters for political advertising, enforce fact-checking on their platforms, and govern micro-targeting more stringently. More importantly, as tech giants with strength, they should collectively stand together to enforce and govern more rules and regulations for political advertising, including the enhanced fact-checking and regulated micro-targeting. Even though Twitter and Google have taken steps towards political ad regulation, these tech giants need to be united moving forward. Furthermore, politicians should regulate themselves. They have a moral obligation to present true information to the public. They should base their campaigns on their values and policies, rather than attacking each other and disseminating fake news. The outcome of a political election affects us all, and as voters, we should have all the accurate information before making our decision.
Political advertisements on digital platforms play a vital role in political communication in this age of heightened media choice and fragmented public attention. While political advertisements on digital platforms have the power to mobilize, they also have the potential power to polarize. We feel banning isn't the right step like what Twitter did. Instead of banning the ads completely, the big tech companies should not give political ads permission for data opacity. Also, they should have clear and strong enforcement instruments for targeting policy violations. They could also enable counter-speech. For example, if someone publishes a political ad, a verified opponent campaigner can publish an ad for the same audience, which is basically an opportunity for counter-speech. Another way that these big tech companies can give value back to the common people through these political ads is by committing to donate all their revenue from political advertising to nonprofits or research inclined towards election integrity. These social media giants can learn from some of the following examples of technological assistance, like Defending Democracy program by Microsoft provides an array of solutions for combating disinformation and security. Google teamed up with a nonpartisan nonprofit defending digital campaigns for consulting digital security and help campaigns in protecting their email accounts. There are also smaller organizations such as Cloudflare with their initiative Project Galileo that offers security help like protection of democratic institutions' websites and civil rights. Though being ethical, moral, and having a civic responsibility should be enough of a reason, but economic incentives can drive companies to act as a proactive democratic citizens. And as we all know, democracy is good for economic growth. A non-partisan way of supporting election can also help a company's bottom line. Being pro-voter and pro-democracy has proven to be good for companies and the well-being of a society. That concludes our presentation on political advertising and the moral and ethical issues that it brings. To reiterate, while we feel there should be more lawful intervention, we also feel the leaders of these tech companies have the moral and ethical obligation to lay out clear parameters for advertisers to promote their political campaigns on their platforms. The leaders of these companies have the ability to create universal principles that lead the overall well-being of the society. There is a very large moral responsibility and one that should be taken very seriously. Thank you.